Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Hey, Ask Me Stuff. I am Ken Coughlin, your host. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Sorry I'm getting off to a little bit of a later start than usual. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, those of you that are kind of in the loop here at church know that we did just change up our the way we do what's called encoding here. We switched over to a company called Resi and a hardware encoder. That just basically means how it translates the video image into data to send it out over the internet for live streaming. And it's a much better system. It's going to make sure we have much smoother streams, but it does result in a little bit more of a delay. So if you're watching me on YouTube right now, you're about 2 minutes behind what's actually going on, whereas before you were about 20 to 30 seconds behind, just so you know. Another reason is I just got a text from Pastor Jay right before I came on the air that said apparently some folks here at Trinity have received emails claiming to be from him, asking for people to buy him gift cards. And so I really quickly had to get an email out to the whole congregation to say, that's not real, that's fake, it's not him, please do not buy him gift cards. If you are really inclined to buy gift cards, and you can buy gift cards at grocery stores and donate them to the food ministry here at Trinity. I'm sure my wife would really appreciate that. For those that don't know, she runs the food ministry. But don't buy gift cards for Pastor Jay. If he needs something, he'll just, come steal it from me or something. No, I'm kidding. I love the man. All right. So thank you for joining us this evening. This is Hey, Ask Me Stuff. If you've never watched the show before, the title says it all. The point of the show is where you out there in the internet lands get to ask me stuff, and then I provide answers. Who am I? My name is Ken Coughlin. I am a Christian apologist, and I'm coming at you from Trinity Lutheran Church and School in Joppa, Maryland, live every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, or almost every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. I know we were not on the air last week because I just had way too much going on and I couldn't do it. So anyway, so that's the way it works, is that you have a question you want to ask us, you submit your question, you ask your question, and then we select a question every week, and we answer that question. If you're wondering how you could get your question on a future episode, here's what you do. You go to trinityjoppa.org/askmestuff, and on that website, there is a form that you can fill out. You fill out that form, you submit your question, you can put your name on it, you don't have to put your name on it, whatever you like. Submit the form, and then we look through that list every week, and we pick something that we're going to talk about. Totally forgot what I was going to say. There was a brilliant thought that I had following up there, but I forgot what it was. So just go to that website and submit your question and get it on a future episode. If you are watching this live, we are right now on YouTube, on the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel. I think we're also broadcasting on the Trinity Joppa Facebook page. So if you're on Facebook, you want to watch us there, that's great too. But if you want to be part of the conversation, I invite you to be part of our conversation this and every evening. And you do that pretty much on YouTube. I don't have that set up to be able to monitor that on Facebook. There's only one of me right now. But if you are on YouTube and watching us on YouTube, and I say something that you agree with, disagree with, just makes you angry, you want to yell at me, whatever, you can put your comment in the live chat on YouTube. I will see that here, and we can actually interact back and forth. If you're not watching us live, that's okay. I'd love to hear what you have to say anyway. If you're watching it on Facebook, same thing. You can still put your comments there in the video, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So before we dive into what our topic tonight is going to be, I got a couple things I want to go over with you real quick. Number one is this. I start this off every week. If you want some free resources on Christian apologetics, here's where you can go. You can go to kencoughlin.org. That's Coughlin with an A-N. And I've got on there on that website a menu there on the left with sub-menus and everything where you can scroll through and try to find a topic you'd like to learn more about. There's a search bar as well where you can, again, search for particular content. And everything on there is free. There's videos, there's articles, there's blog posts, there's audio recordings, pretty much everything that I've been able to find that I still had lying around for the past, 16 years or so, is organized, cataloged, and everything on this website. Again, nothing's behind a paywall, absolutely free. So go to that website, and learn more if you want. You never know. Whatever question you have pressing on your mind, there might be stuff there on there already about it. And then if you have a follow-up question, you could always just send me a follow-up question through the through the forum, the forum that I just showed you about, the Ask Me Stuff website, where you can submit the form and get it on a future episode here. Another thing I want to talk about, if you are in the Baltimore area, I do have a class coming up starting April 24th. Now, some of you may have seen this advertised before. Originally, this was just going to be a 3-week class on May 1st, May 8th, and May 15th. It is now going to be a 4-week class starting on April 24th. So that is not tomorrow night, but the following Wednesday. So we're just a little over a week out at the start of this class. It's called Jesus, the Prophesied Messiah, and it'll be every Wednesday night at 6:30 for those 4 weeks here at Trinity Lutheran Church. If you're not familiar with who we are at 1100 Philadelphia Road in Joppa, Maryland. That's about 20 miles or so northeast of Baltimore. Free food beforehand. We have a free community meal at 5:30, which you can come in and join us for. And then at 6:30, we have the Bible study, which will be in Heritage Hall here at Trinity. And this is going to be, it's a study of Jesus as Messiah, but it's not, while it is a Bible study, it's not just a Bible study. We are going to obviously take a look at some particular scriptures and see how they were fulfilled by Jesus, but we're going to build up to that first. We're going to first, like you can see here, on April 24th, ask, what does Messiah mean? What does that term even mean? What does the concept mean? What was the pre-Christian Jewish concept of Messiah? And maybe even talk a little bit about what the current understanding in the Jewish tradition of Messiah is now. And then on May 1st, we'll talk about how did the New Testament authors interpret Old Testament messianic prophecies. You're going to see that there's different ways of looking at a prophecy and its fulfillment. And so we're going to talk about that on May 1st. May 8th is a very important question, and this is a historical question. Do our modern Bibles accurately reflect what the prophecies originally said before Jesus was born? How do we know they weren't changed? As we're building up to, and as you'll see, a number of these prophecies are astoundingly, obviously pointing toward Jesus of Nazareth. That's going to be my contention in this class. So naturally, the skeptical response to that is, well, they must have been written after the fact, right? As a matter of fact, I've talked before on some other podcasts where a lot of the New Testament scholars, like Bart Ehrman, for example, will date the Gospels after AD 70. They'll say that the Gospels, especially Matthew, Mark, and Luke, could not have been written before the year AD 70, and therefore were not written by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And why does he say, he and others, it's not just Bart Ehrman, but why do they say it had to be written after AD 70? Well, because these Gospels include a prophecy, and this is part of the reason, I'm not saying this is their total justification, but these Gospels include a prophecy that is about for the destruction of the temple that occurred in 70 AD. And they say, well, that couldn't have been included prior to 70 AD because they couldn't have known about it until it happened. Well, sure they could if it was a prophecy, right? And so, but the natural human inclination is to try to say, well, it must have been written afterwards because it's just too obviously pointing to this event. And if we say it was written and we concede it was written beforehand, then we kind of have to concede that, well, God exists and God wrote this book that told humans what was going to happen in the future. That option, as you'll see in that class on May 8th, is not available to the skeptic when it comes to these messianic prophecies. With these prophecies that point toward Jesus, we're going to explore the evidence on that week that shows that beyond any doubt whatsoever, these prophecies were written before Jesus was born, well before Jesus was born. And then the last one, May 15th, that is when we're going to actually dive into some of the prophecies themselves and see, what was written and how it was fulfilled. We're going to probably spend a good amount of time that week on the 53rd, well, technically the end of the 52nd and the 53rd chapter of Isaiah, because that is one of the most powerful prophecies that was fulfilled by Jesus. But that is going to come on May 15th. So if you're available to be here for that class, I invite you to come and be part of that class. It's absolutely free. You don't need to register. Just come on in, show up. We will be filming it. It will get online eventually. I can't promise exactly when that's going to happen. So I'm going to do my best. All right. Another thing I would like to update is we are now up to 2,421 subscribers. Thank you very much to everyone who has subscribed. That is actually 118 additional subscribers since I was last on the air here 2 weeks ago. Wow, thank you all very much. Those who've been following for a while may know that last summer, we actually set what at the time, based upon our growth rate at the time, was a very ambitious goal of trying to reach 2,000 subscribers before June 30th, 2024. So we were setting the goal a whole year out, and we wanted to hit 2,000 subscribers, and that alone would have been a much increased subscriber rate than what we had been seeing. Well, we actually achieved that at the beginning of January. So blew that goal out of the water. And so then we adjusted the goal and we set it to 2,500 subscribers by June 30th, which even that would have assumed a growth in our subscriber rate that was even quicker than what we'd seen in the first 6 months of the year, of our program year. And as you can see, currently at 2,421, we are only 79 subscribers away from reaching that goal, and it's April 16th. So I would love to come on the air next week and tell you all that we've reached that goal. So if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that subscribe button, click the bell so you don't miss any of the great content, and you get notified of the great content we have here on the Trinity Joppa channel. And if you have subscribed, then share the channel, tell others about it, and invite them to be part of what we've got going on here. We'd really love that. I do, one last thing I want to mention before we dive into tonight's content. And I mentioned that, I'd love to be able to come back on next week and tell you all we've met that goal. I just want to be upfront with everybody that there is a possibility I might not be on next week. Now, as I sit here right now, I do plan to be on. I'm not going to go into a lot of details here other than to let people know that my mother's in hospice and has been for a very, very long time. And we're reaching the end of that journey. So I am continuing to go forward with my schedule as normal until, other than I'm making a lot of visits down to Virginia to be with her. But yeah, there obviously when she does pass, my schedule is going to have to be modified, and part of that modification may be that I need to miss a show or two. So just letting you all know, if at the last minute I say I can't be on the air next week, that may be why. All right. So with all that out of the way, let's get into our topic of the week. Going to have a little bit of a fun topic tonight. This was inspired by, well, frankly, a lot of comments that I've been getting on some of the content we've been posting on YouTube and other social media platforms. And so I decided the topic for tonight is, which online questions are worth your time? All right. Look, we all know the best advice when it comes to reading the comments section on the internet is don't, right? Don't read the comments section. But if you're going to, then I think there are, in the years that I've been doing this whole apologetics thing, I've kind of come to the conclusion that there are some indicators from a comment that you see that will kind of tell me right off the bat whether it's even worth having a conversation. And I'm giving this advice tonight really to anybody. You can be a Christian or a non-Christian. If you're a skeptic and you're watching, the categories are the same. Most of the examples I'm going to give are comments that were made by atheists and other skeptics, but not all, as you'll see. And so I take that advice for what it's worth, but I also want to maybe encourage anyone who is watching, if you see some of these categories that I'm going to talk about tonight and realize that maybe they apply to you, then I'm just going to tell you honestly what that says to me. All right. Now, you may not care what that says to me, but if you really are engaging with people, whether it be on the internet or elsewhere, with an eye towards you think that you are actually convincing someone, or you would like to convince people, or you would at least like to have an honest dialogue, Well, there are some categories of comments that immediately are off-putting. And not just immediately are off-putting, but immediately create an impression of you that may not be the impression you're going for. All right? So take it or leave it. And this is my personal opinion. Other people can disagree with me. But let's talk about some of the categories of comments that I see. The three categories I'm going to talk primarily about tonight. And I'm going to give you some examples of real comments that have popped up on whether it be the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel or elsewhere that I think illustrate these three categories. And if there's some overlap between them, obviously, but I want to kind of lump these into three categories, two of which are, shall we say, ways not to do it, and one is the way to do it. And if you're an atheist and you're watching this, obviously you do what you want, right? You do you. And if you want to comment in such a way that falls under one of the first two categories, well, that's your privilege, fine, whatever. I'm just going to tell you honestly how you come across when you do that. But let me be very clear to any Christians that are out there watching. If you are a Christian, these first two categories should not be an option for you. They should not be an option for you. All right, and here's the first category of comment. You'll see I've blacked out everybody's name because the point here is not to call out anybody individually. The first category of comment type that we see in internet comment sections, especially comment sections that have to do with Christianity, is what's called the ad hominem. Now, that is a philosophical term, and it just means you're attacking the person instead of attacking the argument. It's an insult, all right? This is the insulting comments, all right? I have a couple examples there on the screen. First one, these were all directed at me, just so you know, so I'm not giving anybody else's illustrations. That was the least logical reasoning I've heard in a long while. Well, we can give religious people, they are funny, all right? Well, that first part, that is the least logical reason I've heard in a long while, is one of those things that actually might even fall under our second category, which we'll get to in a minute. But looking at that last part, well, we can give religious people, they are funny, all right? Obviously, this is an attempt at ridicule, right? This is not, the problem with an ad hominem attack is, like I said, you're attacking the person, not the argument. So if the whole thing is, if somebody's presented an argument that you don't agree with, and the only thing you can do in response is to insult them, well, you haven't addressed the argument at all, have you? You haven't presented anything. It's kind of like if I present an argument to you where I'd like to say that, that the law of gravity is an objective law that, at least here on Earth, we can't get around, and you respond by calling me a dunderhead. But what does that have to do with the law of gravity? It has nothing to do with the law of gravity, right? All you've done is insult me. Now, I will say that unfortunately in our modern culture, this is a very effective method of convincing people, unfortunately. And it comes down to what I call the schoolyard bully approach, all right? The schoolyard bully approach is basically, I get that name that I kind of came up with based upon the behavior of the schoolyard bully in elementary schools. Think of it this way. How does a schoolyard bully get their way? Do they talk to other children and convince them rationally to let them have a turn on the swing? No. What do? They push another kid off the swing, right? Or they tease and they ridicule other people. And as much as we can all sit here and say that's obviously wrong, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say it's also very effective. Why is it very effective? Because no one wants to be the bully's next victim, right? And so, unfortunately, children are much more likely to side with the bully in those circumstances than they are with the child who's being victimized. This is why we often see a lot of major depression of kids who get bullied, because they feel alone, because they don't feel like they have any allies. But the reason children are siding with the bully is not because they think the bully was justified in what the bully did. They may know very well the bully wasn't justified. They just don't want the bully to turn their attention on them. And the same thing holds true here. An ad hominem attack in logical debate does nothing to address the actual issue at hand. But it can be very effective because whether consciously or unconsciously, people become wary of even giving a fair hearing to a viewpoint that they see getting ridiculed. Why? Because they don't want to look foolish themselves. So they don't even know, they haven't even examined logically whether the view actually is foolish. All they know is all these other people out here are treating it as if it's foolish, and I don't want to look foolish, therefore I'm not going to adopt that view. Now, completely illogical, but very effective, all right? And so we as Christians obviously need to do better than that. All right, a couple other examples I have on here. We have, I heard some circular arguments in my life, but never before one delivered with such sanctimonious sincerity. I actually kind of like that one. That was sanctimonious sincerity. Yeah, obviously insulting me, right? It's a personal attack at me. There were a lot more that I couldn't share, obviously. And the one at the bottom of the screen that just says, cry Christian. It's funny because in the video that was about, I don't recall crying at all, but apparently they think I was. All right. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. A couple other examples of ad hominem attacks here. Your eyes and face tell me who you are. But apparently that insult wasn't explicit enough because this is somebody else that comments down below that says a crybaby. So explaining that my eyes and face apparently say I'm a crybaby. Yep, you're definitely a fundamentalist crank. And here, the bottom one I want to draw attention to for Christians, because as you'll see, the bottom one was a comment that was given by a Christian in response to a video where I was criticizing a position that was adopted by atheist Richard Dawkins. And this comment was, Richard Dawkins never had a brain. We should all stop pretending he does. We shouldn't be saying things like that. Look, I am not perfect. I am not perfect. I will openly admit that. And I will quite often maybe come across as more harshly than I want to. But I will say this. It is always my intention to attack an argument, not a person. So even when I criticize Richard Dawkins, which I do a lot, all right, I don't find him to be very persuasive at all. My intention is to attack the ideas he is espousing, not him personally. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. 1 Peter 3:15. All right? So what I was saying at the top, atheist, if you want to adopt this viewpoint, you want to start throwing ad hominems left and right, that's your right. But understand when you do that, how you come across. To me, and I'm sure others like me, when you attack me personally, first of all, I don't care, all right? If you think you're going to hurt me in some way, I hate to break it to you, but no, you're not. I don't know you. You do not, your opinion literally does not matter to me. When my children were growing up and younger, we used to kind of at the end of every night, we would kind of go through a series of, thank yous and thanking God for things that we got, that we were blessed by that day. But a recurring refrain I used to always emphasize with them also was, who's the only one you care about what they think of you? And the answer is God. That's who we're looking to please. God even takes higher priority than me and higher priority than their mother. All right, God comes first. And so all too often in our society today, we judge or evaluate ourselves based upon the opinions of others. And that's where a lot of mental trauma comes from, right? Because we're always trying to live up to some other person's expectations. Don't let yourself fall into that trap. We only care about what God thinks of us. So atheists are out there that are insulting me. I don't care. You want to do it? Go for it. Whatever. It's not going to bother me in the least. All right. Also, when you do that, I'm probably not going to respond to you. Now, I don't have time to respond to the vast majority of comments that are out there on the videos, but I do try to respond to a few here and there. But I'm not going to respond to an ad hominem attack, period. Because it's not that I care that you insulted me. It's just that you've given me nothing to think that it would be a very interesting conversation to have. Why would I want to talk to you? Why would anyone want to talk to you? Frankly, why would anyone, even your fellow atheists, have any confidence that you have anything valuable to contribute to the conversation? That you have anything valuable to contribute to the debate? If the only response you can make when an argument is presented against your position is to insult the other person, that says, whether you intend to say this or not, that says you don't know what you're talking about. Frankly, it just says you don't know what you're talking about. That's the impression you're giving. That you don't have even the base level of knowledge in this topic, and so the only thing you can do is to insult people, which is part of one of the issues I take up with Richard Dawkins, because he's openly advocated ridicule and mocking Christians. Well, to me, that's a sign of a weak mind. That's a sign of a weak argument. If you had confidence in your view, then state your view. If you don't have confidence in your view, then you state an insult. All right. I do want to say one other thing before I move on to category number 2. So category number 1 of the types of comments that you see out there are ad hominem attacks. Those are not worth your time responding to. So don't. All right. You're not going to have any meaningful conversation. You're probably just going to get insulted some more. Before I get into category 2, this did remind me of something else I wanted to address, is I did get a couple comments this week where somebody was accusing, well, frankly, me, because I run the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel, of deleting comments that I disagreed with. And I replied, I said, no, we don't. All are welcome. You don't have to agree with me. And of course, part of that, what bothers me about that comment, honestly, is because people love to throw that out. Anytime like their comment doesn't show up, they automatically jump to some nefarious motive that they must not like. What I'm saying is so powerful, they disagree with it, so they're deleting it so other people can't see it. All it takes to know that that is not true is to skim down our comment sections, all right? There are all sorts of atheist comments, all sorts of arguments. I got news for you. Whatever brilliant thing you think you said, I bet you if you skim through the comment section, somebody else has probably already said it, all right? So we don't delete comments. Now, what I explained there is we do have some commenting settings and guidelines. This is a church channel. And so, for example, we don't allow people to post links in the comments. We didn't used to have that setting, and guess what? People are posting links to porn sites. So no links. So if you put a link in your comment, know right off the bat, it is not going to appear, and I am not going to approve it, even after the fact. All right. Number 2 is we do have, we do bar profanity and hateful language and things like that. And there's a whole list of terms. I didn't come up with them all. There's a website I went to that said, hey, here's the list of words that we suggest you copy and paste into your settings to make sure, because it has everything from the curse words themselves to the different slang terms for them to the way people try to get around them by using numbers instead of letters or asterisk signs. It's all in there. Well, I found out what happened, what I believe happened. And the reason some people were complaining that their comments were getting deleted, and I'll accept the blame for this, is the comments were on a video about hell, all right, about heaven and hell. And when I didn't understand why people were saying their comments were deleted, because we don't delete them. It's all just automated by YouTube. And so I went back through, and I do try to do this periodically. I go through the ones that are held for review, and I approve those that don't violate the rules, whether they agree with me or not. And when I decided while I was in there, let me look at the settings. And I looked through that list of words that were not allowed to be on the YouTube channel. And guess what word was included? Hell. All right. So obviously, if you're commenting on a video about hell and you can't type the word hell, I agree. That's a problem. So I have fixed that. All right. And I did take out a couple other words as well. I mean, like one of the words in there on the list was virgin. Well, in a Christian channel, we're going to talk about the Virgin Mary, right? So, certain words like that aren't profane words per se. But yes, people do misuse them, and I understand it's a risk. I did clear those off of the list, so hopefully we won't have that issue again. But I just encourage people to stop assuming the worst about everyone. Sometimes it's not that people are out to get you, but we live in a culture where, for some reason, everybody thinks that the world is out to get them. All right, so let's move on to category number 2. Category number 2 of the types of comments that you see on the internet, and this is another category that is not worth responding to, are comments that say nothing of substance. I got a couple examples there at the top there that are more obvious, where the first person just said no, that was it. And another one said nah, which is just a fancy no. Those obviously say nothing of substance. They don't insult, they're not ad hominems, right? These commenters didn't insult me in any way, but they also didn't respond to me in any way. It's basically just like saying, I don't agree with you, Ken. Okay, I don't expect everybody to agree with me. All right, so that's great, but I'm not going to respond to that comment because there's nothing to respond to. You haven't told me why you disagree with me. All right, and then where it gets a little trickier is these 2 comments at the bottom, which, at first reading, you may think they have said something of substance. But if you really boil it down, you realize, no, these comments actually really just amount to the same thing as no or nah. First person here says, you best let the majority of biblical scholars, both theist and secular, know they're collectively wrong because you think their conclusions are ridiculous. This was in regard to the video I posted saying that I thought it was ridiculous to claim that the Gospels and the New Testament books were written late 1st century, early 2nd century. I don't think the evidence holds up dating them that late. And this person said, I think you will need a better argument than provided in this video, though. Okay. Did that comment say why they thought my argument wasn't good? Did it respond in any way to any of the points that I made and said, Ken, I think you have this point wrong. I disagree with this premise of your argument, or I don't think this conclusion logically follows from that premise, or anything like that? No, didn't say anything like that, did it? It just said, you'll need a better argument than the one you provided. Okay, that's basically saying, nope, saying I don't agree. So there's nothing of substance there to say. Now, as a point of fact, I actually did respond to this person, basically saying exactly what I'm saying to you right now. There was nothing to respond to. I just basically said, hey, you know what? If your intention was to contribute something to the discussion, I just encourage you to actually explain why you disagree. Don't just say that you disagree. Explain why you disagree. Same thing with this comment at the bottom of the page is, by foolish, do you mean correct? Even though this video only lasts 5 minutes, you did a phenomenal job. I've never seen as many wrong things stuffed into such a short time before. I mean, some people might look at that and say that's an ad hominem attack on me. I didn't take it that way. They really didn't insult me. They just said, nah, right? They said no. They said, I don't agree. I've never seen as many wrong things stuffed into a short time before. Okay, why do you say they're wrong? What is it you think that I said that was wrong? And why do you think it's wrong? So when you see, these is why I classify this category as comments that just say nothing of substance. They're not ad hominem attacks. They're not insults, but they also don't say anything. They don't ultimately respond to any of the points that were raised. This also is not a category of comments that's worth responding to. What's the point, right? If you ever want me to even have a chance of responding to your comment, and again, even if you follow all the rules and you put things under the 3rd category I'm about to show you, I'm still not necessarily saying I'm going to respond to you. Matter of fact, I did at one point a few weeks ago have to tell someone who's, I don't remember what it was they said, and it was something along those lines that kind of made it seem like that I had some duty to respond to them. And I point blank told them, it's like, I don't have any moral duty to respond to you if I don't want to. I mean, I can, but I'm under no obligation to respond to you in some YouTube chat. I have a life. I have other things I'm going to do. So I may, even if I respond to you one time and you reply back to me, I've seen a lot of skeptics do this, and I think some theists have done it too, where it's like they'll make a comment, I'll respond to it, and then they'll reply back to me, and then I don't respond. And they're always like, I got the Christian apologist. He has no answer for me. No, I probably didn't even look at your response. All right, I just don't have the time. So and that holds true for atheists as well. Christians, I got news for you. An atheist doesn't have any moral obligation to respond to your comment either. So let's all just agree that just because someone doesn't respond to us doesn't mean they don't have a response. It just means they didn't respond for some reason or other. That's all. All right. The last category I'm going to go over tonight of the types of comments that you get on these internet comment sections are sincere, respectful engagement. All right. These are the types of comments that are arguably worth responding to because they say something. All right. And they aren't insulting. They aren't launching on ad hominem attacks. This is a bit smaller. I apologize if you're watching on your phone. You're not going to be able to read that. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can even read the copy I have in front of me. All right. So the first comment here was, you have the same argument as an atheist then. This was in response to a YouTube short that I put out criticizing atheists who, the atheistic argument that the universe came from nothing on an atheistic viewpoint. All right, we'll explain the difference here in a minute between the atheist and the theistic viewpoint. But I basically said, if you're an atheist, it is illogical to, in one breath, say there's no evidence for the existence of God, and in the next breath say the universe came from nothing. Because nothing literally means no thing. There's not a thing there in existence. So by definition, there cannot be evidence for the existence of something that does not exist. Right? So there cannot be evidence for nothing out of which the universe came on a naturalistic viewpoint. That was the argument that I was making in that video. And it's funny, I got I think at least two people who said to me, no atheist is making that argument. And this is another one I caution people against. If you're going to say something like that, you better be darn sure that you're right. I've had a few people, for example, raise the God of the gaps argument. They say that Christians all the time are arguing, the Christian apologists argue that we don't know the answer to something, therefore God did it. And I can safely say there's not a single Christian apologist on the face of the earth today that makes that argument. All right, that says we don't know, therefore God. That's not the structural form of the argument, but that is the way many atheists try to convince you the argument form is of many of the arguments for God. No, the arguments for the existence of God are not based on what we do not know. They are based on what we do know. So, but anyway, so I do feel safe saying that. But in this case, these skeptics told me there's not a single atheist who ever argues the universe came from nothing. To which I provided the direct quote from the late Stephen Hawking in his book, The Grand Design, where he said precisely that. All right. So it's like, I got news for you. If you see a video that I put out and I'm claiming that some atheist has said X, Y, or Z, I think you should, I'm just a little bit of a piece of advice. You should safely assume that some atheists really did say X, Y, or Z. All right. Now, lots of times I don't even say it's a majority. I'll just say some. And so listen to what I say. But I wouldn't be saying it if I hadn't come across it, folks. All right. Anyway, that's all besides the point. But in this, look at the response that I gave this first comment who said, you have the same argument as an atheist, basically. And this was actually, and the reason I responded is because this was not an insult. It did raise, I think, a legitimate criticism that I actually anticipated some people might say, because even the Christian says that God created the universe ex nihilo, right? Which means out of nothing. God created the universe out of nothing. So here I am criticizing atheists for saying the universe came from nothing, but don't Christians also say the universe came from nothing? And in this comment, I explained the distinction. I said, not so. The difference is between saying the universe was made from nothing versus made by nothing. In one, nothing refers to the raw materials used to create. In the other, nothing is allegedly the causal agent itself. God did not use any pre-existing materials from which to make the universe. That is true. But at least there was God as an agent to bring about something new. The atheistic position removes God. It has neither pre-existing materials nor a causal agent. So essentially the distinction is the theist says there was nothing plus God. The atheist just says there was nothing. Well, out of nothing, nothing comes. If all there was nothing, all there still would be is nothing, because there is no causal agent to create something. So of the two positions, one says there was literally nothing, no thing, nothing in existence. The other says there was something, God. You can discuss whether the evidence supports God as the causal agent, but it is completely irrational to say there was literally nothing, no space, no matter, no time, no God, and yet somehow something emerged. Regardless of what you think that something was, there must have been something already in existence to cause the universe. And if all space, time, and matter are within the universe, then it must have been something spaceless, i.e. omnipresent, timeless, i.e. eternal, and matterless, i.e. immaterial, that starts to look an awful lot like God. All right. So hopefully you followed that. The point here is not necessarily to lay out that whole argument as much as the interaction that happened. Now, this next comment you see below is actually not the same person who I was responding to. This is someone who saw my response and just initially said, no one's reading all of that. If we don't believe, we won't. I'm not discounting it, just saying it's not the most likely origin, all right? Again, no insult there, just said nobody's going to be reading everything that you just wrote, to which I gave the following response. I said, if you aren't willing to even take a few minutes reading about an alternate view, how can you possibly say with any confidence what is and what is not most likely? Remember, that's what his comment was. He said he didn't think God was the most likely origin for the universe. Well, how can you say that if you're not even exposing yourself to an alternate viewpoint? At a minimum, you would need at least some understanding of the alternatives before evaluating probabilities. And look what this individual said back to me. He said, I took the time to read your comment. This is the same person who earlier said he didn't. I took the time to read your comment. Your argument won me over. All right, now, not entirely, as we'll see as he goes on here. We obviously don't agree on everything, but apparently I at least won him over that, yeah, you should read comments before you say what's likely and what's not likely. You should read the other viewpoint, all right? I don't typically use my lack of information to justify my point. I'm glad to hear it. Good. Truth is, we don't know. You don't, I don't know. If you believe God is the most plausible reason for our existence, I won't disagree with you. I will, however, say that if we don't have evidence for God, and we don't, we should not assume it is correct. I believe in some force, whether it be God or what have you, but we do not exist for a reason. We are most likely an accident, and it's human nature to think of something higher than ourselves. This was a great interaction. Now, and you can see here, all right, that we did not end up completely agreeing, did we? That wasn't the point. The point is we had, I think, a valuable dialogue, and that was the end of the discussion. At that point, there's really not much. I could have gone on, because I obviously disagree with some of what he said there, but that really wasn't the main point of the video or the conversation here. And sometimes you got to learn when, okay, I put a stone in somebody's shoe. It's more valuable now to walk away than to keep pushing. Excuse me. I will just tell you here that I will disagree with a couple of his points. He does say, truth is, as far as who caused the universe, we don't know, you don't, I don't. And then he went on to say, I will say that if we don't have evidence for God, and we don't, we should not assume it is correct. I disagree with that statement. That is exactly what I was just talking about. That is the misrepresentation of the Christian, the theist position, where he's claiming that Christians are using a God of the gaps. What he's claiming is that the Christian argument amounts to, we don't know what caused the universe, so God must have done it. So we just arbitrarily insert God as an explanation. And again, I will challenge any skeptic who's watching this to find me a single Christian who lays out their premises and their conclusions, all right, like William Lane Craig loves to do, and frankly, most Christian apologists do, that has an argument that is anything resembling that argument form, that shows premises showing what we do not know, and then just as a conclusion says, therefore, God must have done it. No Christian apologist argues that, not a single one. And I would ask, frankly, my atheist friends out there to to try to be objective about it and take a step back. Because another short I put out, which I found so ironic, was, you know how you know that Christians don't do that? Is when they put out their premises and their conclusions. And they spell it out in logical form. Premise one, blah, blah, blah. Premise two, take the Kalam cosmological argument, for example. Premise one, anything that begins to exist has a cause. Premise two, the universe began to exist. Conclusion, therefore, the universe has a cause. All right, you can see the premises of what the Christian is claiming is true. And you can see the logical form of how, if those premises are true, the conclusion must follow. And anybody who knows anything about symbolic logic, and you could break that down, symbolically, and you would not get an argument form that says, we don't know this, therefore God must have done it. That's just not the form of the argument, period, all right? And so that is the easiest way to show that this God of the Gaps argument this God of the Gaps accusation is a false one. And I was watching an interview, though, of Richard Dawkins, where he was asked about whether he would debate William Lane Craig and why he doesn't. He consistently refuses to debate William Lane Craig. And one of the things he said is that he finds William Lane Craig to be so pompous because he says, premise one, deduction two. I'm like, yes, that's how logic works. Why are we labeling it as pompous to actually clearly identify what our premises are and what our conclusion is? I find it so ironic that in one breath you can criticize and claim Christians are using an argument form that they're not using, the God of the Gaps form, and then when they show you they're not using that form by specifically laying out their premises and conclusion, you accuse them of being pompous and don't even acknowledge that the argument, the premises and conclusion they're giving you. Isn't that convenient? I would just say, So anyway, I disagree with this commenter who claims we don't have evidence for God and suggests that Christians just insert God based upon a lack of evidence. That is not the way any theistic argument works, period. But what I found most powerful about his comment was this section at the end where he said that he doesn't believe in God, but he does believe in some force, whether it be God or what have you. And he even said at the end, it's human nature to think of something higher than ourselves. I absolutely agree with you, 100%. Why do you think that is? Why is it human nature to think of something higher than ourselves? All right. There's an argument, and I've got some content on the website about it called The Argument from Desire. And it basically points out that there are natural desires, there are artificial desires. There are, and forgive me, I'm blanking on the exact terminology, distinguishing the two types of desires right now. But there basically are certain desires that are inherent, innate to who we are, to our existence, like a desire for food, where food exists to fulfill that desire. A desire for sexual intercourse, well, sex exists. And then there are other desires that are not innate to our existence, that are artificial desires, that are external. I think it's the internal desires and external desires, maybe the way it's phrased. Internal desires are those ones that come from within ourselves. External desires are those ones that are kind of imposed upon us by a culture outside of us. Like you desire for a Maserati. Well, that's because you've seen all the advertising for a Maserati, and it's convinced you that the car is cool and you'll have status if you have it and all that. That desire is coming at you from the outside as opposed to desires that are coming at you from the inside. Well, I would argue that this desire to seek something higher than ourselves is an internal desire. Every internal desire that a human being has the possibility of fulfillment. And what that means is every human desire, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it, but something exists that can fulfill that desire. All right, so the internal desire of hunger, all right, the desire to eat, well, food exists. The desire for sexual intercourse, well, sex exists. Should be within marriage, obviously, but it exists, all right? All these internal desires do, in fact, have an object that can fulfill them. Exterior desires don't necessarily. All right, you can desire a Maserati even if when they stop manufacturing them. Okay, but internal desires all exist. If this desire for something higher than ourselves, to connect with something higher than ourselves, is an internal desire, like I claim it is, then this argument from desire, the conclusion for the argument from desire, is that therefore something must exist to fulfill that. In other words, God must exist, right? That there has to be something. Now, and the commenter here who said that I believe there is some type of a force, whether it be a God or what have you, I would point out that, yeah, why do you think you feel that way? Because you have this desire for something to connect with something higher than yourself. But if the object that fulfills that desire is something that would basically impose certain expectations upon you, certain moral rules upon you, then the natural response, or the somewhat inevitable response maybe, absent God's intervention, is to say what you did. It's like, okay, well, I have this internal desire for something higher than myself, but, and this is not consciously you're thinking this, I'm talking about this in an unconscious process, but you don't want that to be a personal God. Because if it is a personal God, then that has implications for how you live your life and things like that. And so you convince yourself that there is instead this impersonal something out there, this higher force. Well, it's funny that you should say you don't think there's evidence for God, but you still believe that there's some kind of higher force. Well, what evidence is there for this impersonal higher force? Certainly no more evidence than there is for God. All right, and I think there actually is astounding evidence for a personal God. And so even though there's certainly no greater evidence for what you believe to be true than what you do not believe to be true, you still believe it. Why? It's obviously not for evidence. You have some other motivation that's causing you to believe that. And I would suggest to you that it's because you have this innate desire to connect with something higher than yourself, but at the same time, you have this fallen nature that doesn't want to bend the knee to God, that wants to be your master of your own destiny, so to speak, and in control of your own life completely and not have to submit. And therefore you try to satisfy that desire to connect with something higher by saying, well, I think there's some force out there, but it's not a personal God. All right, that's, believe it or not, that's just my 2 cents for what it's worth. All right, well, so those are 3 types of comments that I think we often see on the internet. One, the ad hominem attack, which is just a personal insult. Folks don't respond to it, all right? The other one is the comment that maybe it's not an ad hominem attack, but it doesn't say anything of substance. It doesn't actually respond to any of the points. It might just say, I disagree with you, but it never says why they disagree with you. Folks, not a whole lot of point engaging in that one either. The one time, if you're going to engage with someone in a comment section, the one time would be with someone who does not insult you, that actually says something of substance. All right, that's the type of person that you might be able to have some sincere, respectful conversation with. And that is the type of interaction that if you're going to have an interaction with somebody on the internet, that's what I would encourage you to limit it to. Obviously, there are things we can do in a personal face-to-face conversation that you can never do over the internet. Just the fact that the conversation could take place over multiple days, where somebody gets to, they don't have to respond immediately to you, can shape the way the conversation plays out. And the same for you. You don't have to respond immediately to them. Also, I find that people will say things on the internet that they would never say to your face. And I do wish that people would have the same moral principles when they're talking online that they do when they're talking in person. But for Christians, I think that is mandatory. That is mandatory. All right, so that's all I got for our topic of the week today. Shoot, I'm hitting the wrong button. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to remind people that if you have a question that you would like to see us address on a future episode of Hey, Ask Me Stuff, go to trinityjoppa.org/askmestuff, fill out the form that's right there on that website, submit your question, and you never know, you might see it here on a future episode that we could address. Also, I didn't say this at the beginning, but I think it probably should go without saying that the types of questions I'm talking about are questions that I say are either about Christianity are Christianity adjacent. So you can ask me questions about the historical Jesus. You can ask questions about the Bible or some Bible passage, about other worldviews, about atheism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, whatever you want to, about other worldviews. That's all fine. And about, the gospel itself is obviously fine. But if you want to ask me a question about how to boil an egg or to prepare corn on the cob, that is not a question I'm going to take up, because honestly, every time I do that, I have to look it up on the internet myself to remember, do you bring the water to the boil first, or do you just put the corn in the water, and then once the water's boiling, then the corn is done? I never remember that. All right, so I always have to look that up. All right, so that's it. Again, please give a like to this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Help us reach that goal of 2,500 subscribers. Trying to get there by June 30th, but the rate we're going, it looks like we might be able to do that a whole lot quicker. All right, that's all I got for you all this evening. Thank you very much for joining me. God bless.